Charles III, the King of Britain since his birth, studies and stages of life. Part 1. Charles III is King of the United Kingdom and the 14 other Commonwealth realms. He was the longest-serving heir apparent and the oldest person to accede to the British throne, at the age of 73, following the death of his mother, Elizabeth II, on the 8th of September 2022. Charles was born in Buckingham Palace during the reign of his maternal grandfather, King George VI, and was 3 when his mother ascended the throne in 1952, making him the heir apparent. He was made Prince of Wales in 1958, and his investiture was held in 1969. He was educated at Cheam and Gordonstoun schools, as was his father, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. Charles later spent 6 months at the Timbertop campus of Geelong Grammar School in Victoria, Australia. After earning a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Cambridge, Charles served in the Air Force and Navy from 1971 to 1976. In 1981, he married Lady Diana Spencer, with whom he had 2 sons, William and Harry. In 1996, the couple divorced after they had each engaged in well-publicized extramarital affairs. Diana died from a car crash the following year. In 2005, Charles married his longtime partner, Camilla Parker Bowles. As Prince of Wales, Charles undertook official duties on behalf of Queen Elizabeth II. He founded the youth charity The Prince's Trust in 1976, sponsors the Prince's Charities, and is a patron, president, or a member of over 400 other charities and organizations. He has advocated for the conservation of historic buildings and the importance of architecture in society. A critic of modernist architecture, Charles worked on the creation of Poundbury, an experimental new town based on his architectural tastes. He is also an author or co-author of over 20 books. An environmentalist, Charles supported organic farming and action to prevent climate change during his time as the manager of the Duchy of Cornwall estates, earning him awards and recognition from environmental groups. He is also a prominent critic of the adoption of genetically modified food. His support for homeopathy and other alternative medicine has been criticized. Charles was born on the 14th of November 1948, during the reign of his maternal grandfather, King George VI. He was the first child of Princess Elizabeth, Duchess of Edinburgh, and Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. His parents would have 3 additional children, Anne, Andrew, and Edward. On the 15th of December 1948, at 4 weeks old, he was christened in the music room of Buckingham Palace by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Geoffrey Fisher. In February 1952, upon the death of his grandfather and the accession of his mother as Queen Elizabeth II, Charles became the heir apparent. Under a charter of King Edward III in 1337, and as the monarch's eldest son, he automatically assumed the traditional titles of the Duke of Cornwall and, in the Scottish peerage, the titles Duke of Rothesay, Earl of Carrick, Baron of Renfrew, Lord of the Isles, and Prince and Great Steward of Scotland. On the 2nd of June 1953, Charles attended his mother's coronation at Westminster Abbey. When Charles turned 5, a governess, Catherine Peebles, was appointed to oversee his education at Buckingham Palace. On the 7th of November 1956, Charles commenced classes at Hill House School in West London. He was the first heir apparent to attend school rather than be educated by a private tutor. He did not receive preferential treatment from the school's founder and headmaster, Stuart Townend, who advised the Queen to have Charles train in football because the boys were never deferential to anyone on the football field. Charles then attended 2 of his father's former schools, Cheam Preparatory School in Hampshire, England, from 1958, followed by Gordonstoun in the northeast of Scotland, beginning classes there in April 1962. In Charles's 1994 authorized biography by Jonathan Dimbleby, Elizabeth and Philip were described as physically and emotionally distant parents, and Philip was blamed for his disregard of Charles's sensitive nature and forcing him to attend Gordonstoun, where he was bullied. Though Charles reportedly described Gordonstoun, noted for its especially rigorous curriculum, as colditz and kilts, he subsequently praised Gordonstoun, stating it had taught him a great deal about myself and my own abilities and disabilities. It taught me to accept challenges and take the initiative. In a 1975 interview, he said he was glad he had attended Gordonstoun and that the toughness of the place was much exaggerated. He spent 2 terms in 1966 at the Timbertop campus of Geelong Grammar School in Victoria, Australia, during which time he visited Papua New Guinea on a school trip with his history tutor, Michael Collins Pearce. In 1973, Charles described his time at Timbertop as the most enjoyable part of his whole education. Upon his return to Gordonstoun, Charles emulated his father in becoming head boy. He left in 1967 with 6 GCE levels and 2 A-levels in history and French, at grades B and C respectively. On his early education, Charles later remarked, "I didn't enjoy school as much as I might have. But that was only because I'm happier at home than anywhere else." Charles broke royal tradition a second time when he proceeded straight to university after his A-levels, rather than joining the British Armed Forces. In October 1967, he was admitted to Trinity College, Cambridge, where he read archaeology and anthropology for the first part of the tripos, and then changed to history for the second part. During his second year, Charles attended the University College of Wales in Aberystwyth, studying Welsh history and language for a term. He graduated from the University of Cambridge with a 2:2 Bachelor of Arts degree on the 23rd of June 1970, the first British heir apparent to earn a university degree. As per tradition, on the 2nd of August 1975, his Ba was promoted to a Master of Arts degree. At Cambridge, Master of Arts is not a postgraduate degree. Charles was created Prince of Wales and Earl of Chester on the 26th of July 1958, though his investiture was not held until the 1st of July 1969, when he was crowned by his mother in a televised ceremony held at Caernarfon Castle. He took his seat in the House of Lords in 1970, and he made his maiden speech in June 1974, the first royal to speak from the floor since the future Edward VII in 1884. He spoke again in 1975. Charles began to take on more public duties, founding the Prince's Trust in 1976, and traveling to the United States in 1981. In the mid-1970s, Charles expressed an interest in serving as Governor-General of Australia, at the suggestion of Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser, but because of a lack of public enthusiasm nothing came of the proposal. Charles commented, "So, what are you supposed to think when you are prepared to do something to help and you are just told you're not wanted?" Military training and career. Charles served in the Royal Air Force and, following in the footsteps of his father, grandfather and 2 of his great-grandfathers, in the Royal Navy. During his second year at Cambridge, he requested and received Royal Air Force training, learning to fly the Chipmunk aircraft with Cambridge University Air Squadron. On the 8th of March 1971, he flew himself to the Royal Air Force College Cranwell to train as a jet pilot. He was presented with his RAF wings in August 1971. After the passing out parade that September, he embarked on a naval career and enrolled in a 6-week course at the Royal Naval College, Dartmouth. He then served on the guided missile destroyer HMS Norfolk and the frigates HMS Minerva and HMS Jupiter. In 1974, he qualified as a helicopter pilot at RNAS Yeovilton, and then joined 845 Naval Air Squadron, operating from HMS Hermes. He gave up flying after crash landing a B-146 in Islay in 1994, for which the crew was found negligent by a board of inquiry. On the 9th of February 1976, Charles took command of the coastal minehunter HMS Bronington for his last 10 months of active service in the Navy. In 1978, he took part in a parachute training course at RAF Bryce Norton after being appointed Colonel-in-Chief of the Parachute Regiment a year earlier. Charles's girlfriends included Georgiana Russell, the daughter of Sir John Russell, who was British ambassador to Spain, Lady Jane Wellesley, the daughter of the 8th Duke of Wellington, Davina Sheffield, Lady Sarah Spencer, and Camilla Shand, who later became his second wife. Early in 1974, Mountbatten began corresponding with Charles about a potential marriage to Amanda Knatchbull, who was Mountbatten's granddaughter. Charles wrote to Amanda's mother, Lady Brabourne, who was also his godmother, expressing interest in her daughter, to which she replied approvingly, though she suggested that a courtship with the not yet 17-year-old girl was premature. 4 years later, Mountbatten arranged for Amanda and himself to accompany Charles on his 1980 tour of India. Both fathers, however, objected. Philip feared that Charles would be eclipsed by his famous uncle, while Lord Brabourne warned that a joint visit would concentrate media attention on the cousins before they could decide on becoming a couple. However, in August 1979, before Charles would depart alone for India, Mountbatten was assassinated by the Irish Republican Army. When Charles returned, he proposed to Amanda, but in addition to her grandfather, she had lost her paternal grandmother and youngest brother Nicholas in the bomb attack and was now reluctant to join the royal family. In June 1980, Charles officially turned down Chevening House, placed at his disposal since 1974, as his future residence. Chevening, a stately home in Kent, was bequeathed, along with an endowment, to the crown by the last Earl Stanhope, Amanda's childless great-uncle, in the hope that Charles would eventually occupy it. In 1977, a newspaper report mistakenly announced his engagement to Princess Marie Astrid of Luxembourg. The engagement of Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles was announced on the 10th of February 2005. He presented her with an engagement ring that had belonged to his grandmother. The Queen's consent to the marriage was recorded in a Privy Council meeting on the 2nd of March. In Canada, the Department of Justice announced its decision that the Queen's Privy Council for Canada was not required to meet to give its consent to the marriage, as the union would not result in offspring and would have no impact on the succession to the Canadian throne. Charles was the only member of the royal family to have a civil rather than a church wedding in England. Government documents from the 1950s and 1960s, published by the BBC, stated that such a marriage was illegal, though these were dismissed by Charles's spokesman and explained to be obsolete by the sitting government. The marriage was scheduled to take place in a civil ceremony at Windsor Castle, with a subsequent religious blessing at St. George's Chapel. The venue was subsequently changed to Windsor Guildhall, because a civil marriage at Windsor Castle would oblige the venue to be available to anyone who wished to be married there. 4 days before the wedding, it was postponed from the originally scheduled date of the 8th of April until the following day in order to allow Charles and some of the invited dignitaries to attend the funeral of Pope John Paul II. Charles's parents did not attend the civil marriage ceremony. The Queen's reluctance to attend possibly arose from her position as Supreme Governor of the Church of England. The Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh did attend the service of blessing and later held a reception for the newlyweds at Windsor Castle. The blessing, by the Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle, was televised. Official duties. See also, list of official overseas trips made by Charles III. In 2008, the Daily Telegraph described Charles as the hardest working member of the royal family. He carried out 560 official engagements in 2008, 499 in 2010, and over 600 in 2011. During his time as Prince of Wales, Charles undertook official duties on behalf of the Queen. He officiated at investitures and attended the funerals of foreign dignitaries. Charles made regular tours of Wales, fulfilling a week of engagements each summer and attending important national occasions, such as opening the Senate. The 6 trustees of the Royal Collection Trust met 3 times a year under his chairmanship. In 1970, Charles visited Bermuda to mark the Parliament of Bermuda's 350th anniversary. In his speech to Parliament in referring to the actions of Charles I, Charles said, "Bearing in mind I am the first Charles to have anything to do with the Parliament for 350 years, I might have turned nasty and dissolved you." Charles also represented the Queen at the independence celebrations in Fiji in 1970, the Bahamas in 1973, Papua New Guinea in 1975, Zimbabwe in 1980, and Brunei in 1984. In 1983, Christopher John Lewis, who had fired a shot with a .22 rifle at the Queen in 1981, attempted to escape a psychiatric hospital in order to assassinate Charles, who was visiting New Zealand with his first wife Diana and son William. While Charles was visiting Australia on Australia Day in January 1994, David Kang fired 2 shots at him from a starting pistol in protest of the treatment of several hundred Cambodian asylum seekers held in detention camps. In 1995, Charles became the first member of the royal family to visit the Republic of Ireland in an official capacity. In 1997, Charles represented the Queen at the Hong Kong handover ceremony. At the ceremony, he read the Queen's message to Hong Kongers, which said, "Britain is part of Hong Kong's history and Hong Kong is part of Britain's history. We are also part of each other's future." In 2010, Charles represented the Queen at the opening ceremony of the 2010 Commonwealth Games in Delhi, India. He attends official events in the United Kingdom in support of Commonwealth countries, such as the Christchurch Earthquake Memorial Service at Westminster Abbey in 2011. From 15 to the 17th of November 2013, he represented the Queen for the first time at a Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Colombo, Sri Lanka. In 2013, Charles donated an unspecified sum of money to the British Red Cross Syria Crisis Appeal and DEC Syria Appeal, which is run by 14 British charities to help victims of the Syrian civil war. According to The Guardian, it is believed that after turning 65 years old in 2013, Charles donated his state pension to an unnamed charity that supports elderly people. In March 2014, Charles arranged for 5 million measles-rubella vaccinations for children in the Philippines on the outbreak of measles in Southeast Asia. According to Clarence House, Charles was affected by news of the damage caused by Typhoon Yolanda in 2013. International health partners, of which he has been patron since 2004, sent the vaccines, which are believed to protect 5 million children below the age of 5 from measles. Letters sent by Charles to government ministers during 2004 and 2005, the so-called Black Spider memos, presented potential embarrassment following a challenge by the Guardian newspaper to release the letters under the Freedom of Information Act 2000. In March 2015, the Supreme Court of the United Kingdom decided that Charles's letters must be released. The letters were published by the Cabinet Office on the 13th of May 2015. Reaction to the memos upon their release was largely supportive of Charles, with little criticism of him. The memos were variously described in the press as underwhelming and harmless, and that their release had backfired on those who seek to belittle him, with reaction from the public also supportive. In 2015, it was revealed that Charles had access to confidential UK cabinet papers. Charles and Camilla made their first joint trip to the Republic of Ireland in May 2015. The trip was called an important step in promoting peace and reconciliation by the British Embassy. During the trip, Charles shook hands in Galway with Gerry Adams, leader of Sinn Féin and widely believed to be the leader of the IRA, the militant group that had murdered Charles's relatives in a terror attack. The Galway event was described by the media as a historic handshake and a significant moment for Anglo-Irish relations. In the run-up to Charles's visit, 2 Irish Republican dissidents were arrested for planning a bomb attack. Semtex and rockets were found at the Dublin home of suspect Donal O'Coistilba, member of a self-styled Ag na H Irene organization, who was later jailed for 5.5 years. He was connected to a veteran Republican, Seamus McGrain of County Louth, a member of the Real Era, who was jailed for 11.5 years. Charles has made frequent visits to Saudi Arabia in order to promote arms exports for companies such as B Systems. In 2013, 2014, and 2015, he met with the commander of Saudi Arabia's National Guard Mude bin Abdullah. In February 2014, he took part in a traditional sword dance with members of the Saudi royal family at the Janaria Festival in Riyadh. At the same festival, British arms company B Systems was honoured by Prince Salman bin Abdulaziz. Charles was criticised by Scottish MP Margaret Ferrier in 2016 over his role in the sale of Typhoon fighter jets to Saudi Arabia. According to Charles's biographer Catherine Mayer, a Time magazine journalist who claims to have interviewed several sources from Charles's inner circle, he doesn't like being used to market weaponry in deals with Saudi Arabia and other Arab Gulf states. According to Mayer, Charles has only raised his objections to being used to sell weapons abroad in private. Commonwealth heads of government decided at their 2018 meeting that Charles would be the next head of the Commonwealth after the Queen. The head is chosen and therefore not hereditary. On the 7th of March 2019, the Queen hosted a Buckingham Palace event to mark the 50th anniversary of Charles's investiture as the Prince of Wales. Guests at the event included the Duchess of Cornwall, the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, Prime Minister Theresa May and Welsh First Minister Mark Drakeford. The same month, at the request of the British government, Charles and Camilla went on an official tour to Cuba, making them the first British royalty to visit the country. The tour was seen as an effort to form a closer relationship between the UK and Cuba. In January 2020, Charles became the first British patron of the International Rescue Committee, a charity which aims to help refugees and those displaced by war, persecution, or natural disaster. In April 2021 and following a surge in COVID-19 cases in India, Charles issued a statement announcing the launch of an emergency appeal for India by the British Asian Trust, of which he is the founder. The appeal, called Oxygen for India, helped with buying oxygen concentrators for hospitals in need. On the 25th of March 2020, it was announced that Charles had contracted COVID-19 during the pandemic. He and his wife subsequently isolated at their Birkhall residence. Camilla was also tested but returned a negative result. Clarence House stated that he showed mild symptoms but remains in good health. They further explained, "It is not possible to ascertain from whom the prince caught the virus owing to the high number of engagements he carried out in his public role during recent weeks." Several newspapers were critical that Charles and Camilla were tested promptly at a time when many NHS doctors, nurses, and patients had been unable to be tested expeditiously. On the 30th of March 2020, Clarence House announced that Charles had recovered from the virus, and that, after consulting his doctor, he was no longer isolating. 2 days later, he stated in a video that he would continue to practice social distancing. In October 2020, a letter sent by Charles to Australian Governor-General John Kerr after the 1975 dismissal from office of Prime Minister Gough Whitlam was released as a part of the collection of palace letters regarding the 1975 Australian constitutional crisis. In the letter, Charles appeared to be supportive of Kerr's decision, writing that what Kerr did last year was right and the courageous thing to do, and most Australians seemed to endorse your decision when it came to the point, adding that he should not worry about demonstrations and stupidities that arose following his decision. In November 2021, Charles attended the ceremonies held to mark Barbados's transition into a parliamentary republic, which removed the Queen as Barbadian head of state. Charles was invited by Prime Minister Mia Mottley as the future head of the Commonwealth, and it was the first time that a member of the royal family attended the transition of a realm to a republic. On the 10th of February 2022, it was announced that Charles had tested positive for COVID-19 for a second time and was self-isolating. His wife later also confirmed contracting the virus, followed by the Queen herself 10 days after Charles's second diagnosis. Charles and his wife had received doses of a COVID-19 vaccine in February 2021, delivering the Queen's speech on behalf of his mother, May 2022. In May 2022, Charles attended the state opening of Parliament and delivered the Queen's speech on behalf of his mother as a Councillor of State for the first time. In June 2022, The Times reported that Charles had privately described the UK government's Rwanda asylum plan as appalling and feared that it would overshadow the June Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in Rwanda, where Charles represented the Queen. It was later reported that cabinet ministers had warned Charles to avoid making political comments, as they feared a constitutional crisis could arise if he continued to make such statements once he became king.